And now, you're tuned into RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's RBLR Sports.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of RBLR Sports, specifically coming at you through the Rowdies section. My name is Leonardo Santos, and I'm always joined by my amazing co-host, James. James, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well. We are here to discuss something that I find pretty exciting. So we have a couple of really cool games coming up later in the week that we are going to get to. And yeah, that's why I am feeling so well. What about you? How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. Obviously, come a day after that difficult Bucks loss, I felt a little bit down this morning. It took me a while to get out of bed.
That's true.
To even make the decision to get out of bed, but ultimately I did. And, we just got to our head up and move forward because, like you said, we do got some upcoming games. And, this week we usually talk about the Rowdies. We'll get into it a little bit with the Rowdies, but mainly the games we're talking about, James, are the World Cup qualification games, specifically in Concacaf, because this week we are going to talk about those games. And the World Cup qualification starts up again this week with, half of the octagonal games already played. So that means we have the other half left. How are you feeling about that, James?
I think that things are looking pretty good from a U.S. men's national team standpoint. And I think that we've got a good chance to keep our numbers up over this, FIFA window. And hopefully, barring any weird outcomes, I think that it'll be good. But what about you with Mexico? How are they looking?
Well, it's a 50-50 for me. We haven't been the best team lately. We'll get more into that later, but that's just my first takes in this episode. But yeah, so I'm going to be talking about mainly the Mexican national team, and James will be taking the role to talk about the U.S. men's national team. But before that, James, I believe you have some exciting Rowdies news.
Yeah, so, usually these past couple of weeks, we've had news that comes out for, re-signings, new players. We actually have both of those this week. So the Rowdies have signed Jake LaCava on loan from New York Red Bulls. If anyone remembers last year when we played the New York Red Bulls 2, the Baby Bulls, he was on that team. He has been signed to a homegrown deal for the MLS club, and then they loaned him to us for this year. We have also signed goalkeeper CJ Cochran on loan from OKC Energy. Now, I got to be honest, I'm not too familiar with CJ Cochran. I haven't seen a great deal of OKC Energy in the past, but I did like what I saw of Jake LaCava last year. He seemed to be a player who, I actually had tried to predict what he would be able to do when we were playing the New York Red Bulls, and he seemed to always upstage me and actually go out and have a much better game than I predicted. So hopefully he'll be able to, have that same magic for us. What do you think about these two signings?
Well, I think it's great that we're providing competition for Raiko Rosarina. I think he is a really good goalkeeper, but it's good that you bring in another goalkeeper who has plenty of experience in the USL and can compete with Raiko Rosarina, to really battle out for that number one goalkeeping position. And for Jake LaCava, just bringing in more youth talent into this club. We all know that usually the younger guns in the team bring the most energy, and they're always have a point to prove at such a young age. So when you bring in players like that, and like you said, James, he was someone that was a standout from that New York Red Bulls 2 team, and let's be honest, they weren't really that good. They were always towards the bottom of our division and bottom of our conference as well. But he's someone that did stand out. So my initial impressions, these are really two good signings for the Rowdies.
That's right. And the re-signing announcement that the Rowdies gave to us last week, it was actually a day after we recorded, so we were unable to announce it at the time. But possibly the biggest player from last season's team, certainly the MVP for many people last year, Sebastian Guenzatti, was re-announced. So everybody soak it in. We have El Capitano back for this upcoming year. I'm obviously excited as I can be. Leo, I assume that you are feeling just about the same.
I'm feeling very relieved because I remember it was your last episode, the episode before that, James, where you and I were talking about, we're signing all these other strikers. We were announcing re-signing news, but there's no room for Seba Guenzatti. And I was on Twitter hearing rumors and speculation about him possibly leaving. But, I'm really relieved that he has signed again. And I know, he has a point to prove this season with obviously trying to get the all-time goal scoring record for the Rowdies. And obviously to get his hands on the USL Championship trophy.
That's exactly right. Those are two things I'm sure that he will be chasing this year after having been, let's say, robbed of the USL Championship trophy for the last two. So that is going to do it for our Rowdies coverage, because I'm assuming over the rest of the week we will see any more news that comes out. But that is what we have for the roster updates right now. We are going to get into what we had said we were going to talk about, the CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers. And Leo will be our in-house expert on Mexico. I will be the expert on the U.S., along with someone that RBLR sports fans might already be aware of. It's Ben Whitelaw from RBLR Rays. And Ben, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I hope RBLR fans are aware of me. I've been on here for a little bit on the Rays podcast, so it might be nice if they know me. But if not, hi, I do the Rays, and I'm here on the Rowdies pod right now.
And as much as you obviously do cover the Rays, you have a pretty good, at least background in following soccer and following the men's national team.
Oh yeah, definitely. Soccer is my first love for sure, and I love everything about it, so I'm excited to be here.
All right, well, then I'm sure you will fit in pretty well with this. So as I said, Ben and I are going to do the U.S., and we're going to get to Leo looking at Mexico in a bit. Beforehand, we want to cover for everybody what is on the line, because this podcast actually came at the request of our producer Eureka, who wanted to get a little bit more background on the World Cup qualifying process now that it is set to start up again. So CONCACAF sends 3.5 teams to the World Cup, at least until 2026, with the next one coming up in Qatar in November. Now, what does 3.5 teams mean? That means that the first three teams to qualify to top the table will be automatically qualified for the World Cup. The fourth team will play for an intercontinental playoff, and that will go up this time around against the champion of the Oceania region. So that right now will be Canada, the US, Mexico, and Panama, who are in the top four spots. We are in this octagonal round now, which is the final round of these qualifiers. So these are the last 6 games to play, unless you are that team that gets in the 4th place position and you have the intercontinental playoff. That team will probably end up playing New Zealand. They are the perennial Oceania champions, and they seem to be on course to do that again based on the rosters of the teams that they will be playing. So like I said, each team has 6 games left in this round, including 3 coming up this at the end of this week and next week, and then another 3 in March. Mexico are going to play Jamaica away, Costa Rica at home, and then Panama at home before March. And the U.S. will play El Salvador at home, Canada away, and Honduras at home after that. So as I said, it goes right now: Canada, U.S., Mexico, Panama from 1, 2, 3, 4. That's Juan Tejada's Panama, although he has not been called up this time around. So I will turn it over here to Leo to discuss how Mexico is looking. And, I will interrupt you if I have any questions. And I'm sure, Ben, you can do the same for anything that you have that you wanted to bring up here with Leo.
All right, sounds good.
Whenever you guys want, just chip in. Feel free to interrupt me. Any questions, just let me know. But to get into it, I've already mentioned it before, James, and Ben, that Mexico, they've had not the best of years in 2021. Obviously, I feel like the tide did kind of shift to where, Mexico was that powerhouse in CONCACAF, but now it seems as if he was saved. Now it has that main power. Mexico slipping not only in second, but they could find themselves slipping to that third powerhouse, because the way Canada is playing, the way their younger players are making moves to Europe, and they're not only, playing in Europe, but they're starting for Europe. You look at Jonathan David with Leo, and you look at Davies with Bayern Munich. These are really big teams. So, Mexico really needs to get their act together real quick, or else, there could be some, I want to say, stressful or really terrible times, but there could be cause for concern very soon if they don't fix their bad form and bad results. Because, back in Estadio Azteca, not Estadio Azteca, they played 2 games against the Canada and the U.S., and they lost both by a score of 2-0, which, Mexico did not really play good at all. It seemed as if they were just going out there and relying on talent and to do the work, and ultimately it doesn't work if you don't have a solid game plan, or if you don't really have some kind of rhythm to your play, and that ultimately cost them. So with all that being said, pressure is mounting on Tata Martino, who is the head coach for the Mexican national team. And James, I'm pretty sure you know this probably applies to the way the U.S. Soccer Federation runs it too. But if you're the head coach of a team and you put in a bad run of results, you might have won your first 9 games, but if you lose 4 in a row, this starts to put some pressure on you to see if you're the right guy. Because once that fairy tale base is over, you hit back to reality, and it really matters how can you respond after coming off not one of your best years in charge of the Mexican national team. Luckily for Mexico, they will welcome 2 home games against these quote-unquote lesser competition. But we've seen, nations in the bigger nations in Concacaf, such as U.S., Canada, and Mexico, drop points against these lesser, opponents. The U.S. did drop points. Forgive me for if I'm wrong, but James, was it Panama away? Did they drop points again, or was it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was Panama away. They lost that game, actually, which, it's not something that I think too many American fans expected, but this Panama team has been pretty resurgent.
Yeah, exactly. And even Mexico, I believe they dropped points playing out Panama too. I believe it was a 1-1 draw, but they were down 1-0 in that game. So, yeah, you can see them as lesser competition, but again, these opponents, they're here to qualify for a World Cup, which is every 4 years, and they're going to give it their all. And they may have the mentality of we have nothing to lose, really, and we could pull the upset. But yeah, so everyone, the feeling for the Mexican national team fans is that the fans and the press, they want 9 points. They're expecting all 9 points for these next 3 games. If you're not playing Canada or US, then surely you have to beat the other teams if you're Mexico, because you are considered a powerhouse in Concacaf. However, you look at teams like Jamaica, they do have some good players, but again, these are players who may be good with their European clubs, such as Michael Antonio, who's just an all-star for that West Ham United team, is doing really good in Premier League. But when you bring them down to the Jamaica national team, you don't really know what to expect from them. They can either be really good or they can just be really poor. And you look at some of the players they have too, Kamal Miller, JV and Brown. These are really good defenders in MLS, but you expect the Jamaican team to get at least some good results. But they're not really in the top 4, if I'm correct. So you don't know what you're gonna get with them. They could be a surprise. It could be a team they just move to the side and just take all 3 points. But I do believe Costa Rica and Panama do pose greater threats, because Costa Rica, as I'm pretty sure Ben and James, you both know how in that 2014 World Cup, Costa Rica, they just surprised the whole world and made it all the way to the quarterfinals. And Panama, somehow they slipped into the 2018 World Cup. Didn't have a campaign to remember, but they did make it to that 2018 World Cup. So these are 2 teams that have been there and done it at the big stage. So obviously, when we go against those 2 teams, they're going to be difficult to play against. But like I said, Mexico always expects to win, and especially win at home. And one thing to keep in mind, I do believe the first game that Mexico plays will be behind closed doors, and I think that's a fine from the Concacaf Federation or FIFA, excuse me, because there has been chants of gay slurs from the Mexican fans, and they're trying to find ways to stop that kind of action happening within the game. And
if I'm not mistaken, for that, aren't they also? I think that there's supposed to be like a $5,000 fine if they catch you doing that now. Is that correct?
Yeah, $5,000 fine if they catch you, and a 5-year ban if they catch you doing that. And I believe Mexico now, they'll only have in their big Estadio Azteca stadium, they're only gonna have 2,000 fans to lower CC that will lower the amount of those gay slurs being chanted by the fans. So we're taking extreme measures, and players have stepped up on the Mexican national team, advising players to stop these chants, because if Mexico is losing, let's say 2-1 in the game, and there's 10 minutes left, and Mexico fans decide to say that those gay slurs, that time that the referee stops the game, that's they don't add that time back in stoppage time. That's literally time in the game, so they're only hurting themselves. I don't know why they continue to do so, but I do think extreme measures has to be in place, and it has. So hopefully it does work. But in regards to the roster, I was actually I'm pretty happy with the roster. I feel like they could have called up some other players. I'll get to them later. But really, we're looking at 2 players who, like you have here mentioned, James, that they're not really starters. Alvarado and Córdoba making that big move from Club America to Tigres. I feel like he has some problems fitting into Tigres. I feel like Tata Martino's telling him, just take your time to fit into this Tigres team. Or maybe it could be. It's also possible that Tata Martino's kind of upset that Córdoba decided to move to another Liga MX team instead of jumping to Europe, which is something pretty common with these young Mexican stars. They're like battling with the Mexican market instead of making that jump to European teams, that doesn't seem to be a problem at all for the USA team because the MLS is turning into almost like a academy or like a product for European teams to shop at, for these for these young stars. You look at not Brian Reynolds, you look at Brendan Aronson. These are players that are making the jump to Europe in recent seasons. Reggie Cannon, so with the Mexican team, it seems as if they're competing with their own market. Alvarado's another example. He was playing for Cruz Azul. He got bought to another team. Cordova for $10 million. That's money. I believe reading reports that European teams were offering at least $5-6 million for him, but Tigres comes and says we offer you $10 million. So obviously, whether it was a player's decision or not, the club is going to accept that bid because it is more money. So that I do believe that's stopping these players from making that jump to Europe, which is really, really, really bad for the Mexican team in the long run because you're missing out on valuable experience. I mean, you see the difference Christian Pulisic has compared to these other players in Concacaf because he plays for one of the biggest teams not only in Europe but in the world with Chelsea. So that's one thing that's really holding the team back. But in regards to those European players that did get caught up, Gerardo Arteaga, he's someone that doesn't really get caught up or someone that isn't really known within the Mexican team. That's because he's kind of flying under the radar. He's a left back. He plays for Genk in Belgium. Recently, he did not get caught up for 6 months, I believe, because he denied a call-up from Tata Martino, but it was mainly because he said he wants to focus on his mental health. I don't know. Tata Martino took that, so he left him out. I really don't understand why he...
Seems like a pretty reasonable thing, especially when he had just gone over to Europe and then all of COVID happens. So, but whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was kind of upset that he kind of took it personal. I feel like at this day and age, you understand if a player comes out and says they want to take care of their mental health. But another player I want to mention, Eder Gutierrez. He's someone that he plays with PSV. They're in first place in the Eredivisie. I believe that's the league name for the top division in Netherlands. He was someone that I believe he only made the roster because he played in Europe, and then for a while he didn't make the roster because he wasn't really playing. He was a sub. He wouldn't really get subbed in, but all of a sudden he's the first name on that team sheet. He's one of the key figures for PSV being in first place in their league. And we got to remember there's players like Mario Götze on that team as well, who we all know scored the winning goal in the 2014 World Cup. And he's just a starter, and he's really, really picked up some good form and good timing for him, because, as we said, this is the second half of World Cup qualifiers, and you need your biggest players to be in the best form possible. Another player from Europe that got caught up was Diego Lightness. He's someone, however, is not in the best form. He's barely played any sufficient amount of minutes for Real Betis in the La Liga in Spain, the top division over there. He plays for Real Betis alongside another Mexican national team player, Andres Cuadrado. But Diego Lightness, he's someone that is really talented. He is a game changer. However, if you don't find that time on the field from your club, I feel like that does kind of affect you when you go back to your national team, because then you don't really have that experience or that form to base off with your club and somehow find a way to transition that when you play with the national team, which kind of makes it harder and kind of makes you look like you weren't really ready for the moment. So that I do have a question about him getting called up, maybe just because he has a European experience and he does still participate in trainings and stuff like that. But I named this other player, Julian Araujo. He's someone that played with LA Galaxy. He was someone that had dual citizenship, James. I don't know if you know, but he had dual citizenship with the U.S. and Mexico. He was initially called up for the I believe it was for the Nations League roster for the U.S. He didn't make the final cut, and I believe it was for again in a Copa Oro, the Gold Cup. He didn't make it again, so when he didn't make the final roster twice for the United States, he decided to switch his nationality and decides to play for Mexico. And this is his first call-up. It was his second call-up, but his first call-up for an official FIFA game. Before, it was a friendly against Chile, I believe, where the Mexican national team decided to call up a lot of young players. And it was a really good experience for all those guys. But I'm really excited about him, the LA Galaxy right back. He's someone that I've been impressed with watching the MLS. And James, I don't know if you're familiar with the Mexican national team, but I want to ask you this: do you think, because obviously the Mexico team last summer, Jimenez, who plays for Wolves, he suffered an injury, a terrible head injury, and needed time to recover. So for Mexico, they were looking for a striker to replace him for the Gold Cup last year. And instead of looking in the Mexican pool, they helped Rogelio Funes Mori, who's a striker for Monterrey and Liga MX. He's someone that's Argentinian, but he got a citizenship to play with the Mexican national team, and now he has. But there has been some, different views from the fans in regards to, the Mexican national team because he just missed a lot of chances, like clear-cut chances that he usually puts away from Monterrey. James, do you think he's a good backup for Raul Jimenez, or do you think they need to find another striker that could provide him almost that same kind of power and threat that Jimenez provides?
Well, so my opinion on Funes Mori is, well, I think that he's a very good player at this role. I think that, he and his twin brother actually were, they were from Argentina. They moved to Texas for a little while. They played for FC Dallas, and then they moved back to Argentina. And since then, their careers have gone in different directions. I think that his brother played for Everton, and then now he's in the Middle East. And if you look at Rogelio, he's doing pretty well in Mexico right now. But I think that he's also getting towards, not the end of his career, but he is kind of starting to twilight, let's say. He's in, I think he's 31, 32, something like that. So, it's not a position that you unfortunately last very long because it requires a lot of, agility and a lot of speed. You have to be able to move your hips very quickly, obviously, as a striker. And, also in his role specifically, you have to play with your ball, with your back to the net and the ball in front of you and keep the defender from trying to, steal the ball from you. Obviously, that's something that we talked about with a lot of Rowdies players last year. It's an important skill for him to have. And I think that he is good at the position specifically of a backup to Raul Jimenez, but whether or not he can fill in, I'm not entirely sure. The other problem is, if you have Raul Jimenez, if you have Rogelio Funes Mori, who are you going to have after that can come in and fill that position? So you're going to get to another option who has not been called up, Chicharito. But, is he somebody that can be called up? So far, I don't think that Tato Martino has shown any interest in him. And I guess that's just the way that it is. But it's what is the case here. So if they're not going to call up Chicharito, then in my opinion, at least, Rogelio Funes Mori is probably the best one to come in after that. And really quickly on Julian Araujo, you mentioned him, the right back with LA Galaxy. I actually saw him play for the U.S. under-20 national team when they beat Mexico in the championship to qualify for the FIFA under-20 World Cup. So I understand why he has at this point switched nationality to play for Mexico, because right now, as much as the U.S. has had a lot of problems at left back over the years, they really haven't had that same trouble with right back. And in particular, right now, we are absolutely flush with very good right back. So if he had the better chance of playing for Mexico, I did not fault him at all for that one. There are some players that I'm kind of annoyed that we lose over the years, and you're going to mention one in a little bit. But Julian Araujo, I totally understand, and I think that he probably made the best move for his personal career.
Yeah, Julian Araujo, he's someone that really impressed me. Like I said, with that accident when he first put on the Mexico jersey for that friendly against Chile. And like I said, I think he did take the route where he did have a more promising future in regards to which national team he should represent. Because you look at the Mexican national team, our only right back we had was Rodriguez for Tigres, and I didn't really think he was the best. I feel like he was our only decent option. But now you have him, and also you add in there's a right back with America who has attraction from European clubs. Jorge Sanchez, he's someone that's I feel like his game has definitely improved in recent seasons. Every time I watch him, he just becomes like a dynamic right back who just gets involved in the play. And most importantly, he also knows how to defend. It's one thing to get up to play, but it's also another thing to make sure you know how to defend when you're 1v1 to show that you can attack and you can also protect your goal. So the fact that Mexico now has two promising right back options is really, really good to hear. But as you were getting to, James, another American that changes nationality to play for the Mexican national team is David Ochoa. He's a goalkeeper for Real Salt Lake. I mentioned him here because there's another goalkeeper who plays for Santos Laguna. His name is Carlos Acevedo. He's deemed to be the next Memo Ochoa, the next goalkeeper to take the mantle and really be the main goalkeeper for his Mexican team from years to come. And in this roster, specifically for these three upcoming World Cup qualifier games, Tata Martino called up 4 goalkeepers but not even one of them was either Acevedo or Ochoa. And that's something I really had a problem with because these are two players that have proven themselves in their respective leagues of how, reliable they could be, how much of a good goalkeepers they are. They really proved themselves that they at least earned a call up. Maybe, you don't play them, but the least you could do is call them up, at least one of them, because they proved that, they can play at a top level. So that I don't really understand. That's a head scratcher for me. But, I think when David Ochoa first announced that he was going to switch nationalities, did you find that as a big deal, James, or were you okay with this decision? Because, the U.S. is no short of really good goalies right now.
Yeah, we definitely do have, some pretty good keepers coming through, and there's a goalkeeper on the U.S. roster that I plan to highlight when Ben and I are going over that. But I was definitely more upset about losing David Ochoa than Julian Araujo because it seems like Ochoa has the potential in him to be a star, and he's got some real character on the field. He can engender some hate from the opposing fans, and honestly, in games between the U.S. and Mexico, that really helps because it's a good way to put players off their game. But it might be the case that he's putting American players and American fans off of their game in the future. We will have to see.
Yeah, definitely we'll have to see. And like we said, both of these goalies, Acevedo and David Ochoa, they're both really, really young. Hopefully they get their shot. I really think they both deserve it. But in regards to other players that didn't make the call up, you mentioned Chicharito, James. He's someone that, if Raul Jimenez isn't really firing or he's not available, your next option is Funes Mori. But is he really that good option you want? And it seems to me that Tata Martino has something with Chicharito because there was one Gold Cup, I believe it was 2019, where Chicharito declined a call-up from Tata Martino to represent the national team because he just moved to LA that season. He wanted to spend more time with his wife, and his wife was pregnant, and it was almost time to where he was expecting his first kid, I believe. So, for those reasons, he decided to reject the call-up. And Tata Martino proved to me that he's someone that you do not reject the call-up from because he will take it personally, and he would not call you up. So I feel like his time might be done. It kind of hurts me to say it because he is, for many years he was a Mexican favorite. He is Mexico all-time top goal scorer, and he had a really good 2018 World Cup. I still maybe you bring him in at least one or two games. I feel like he will get you a goal. He still has that instinct. Obviously he's past his best. He's 33, 34, I believe. He's playing in MLS now. But I still feel like he still offers you, if you give him a little bit of time, at least 20 minutes on the field, he might offer you a chance to get that goal that you're looking for. He just has that natural instinct to score goals. I mean, look at Manchester United. That man did not score regular tap-ins. The post would hit his face. The post would hit his knee. The knee would hit his face, then go in the back of the net. He would score just goals that, you don't typically find, but ball just seems to find him, and then when it hits him, it hits the back of the net. Another two players I want to mention, Jonathan Dos Santos, someone that played with LA Galaxy, moved to America. I thought he was a really good center mid. Obviously he moved down here after playing in Europe. I thought he's someone that's really consistent, and whenever I watch him play, I just feel like he makes that Mexican national team better because he just applies that constant pressure. He has good playmaking ability skills, and I've always liked the way he played. But for some reason, he hasn't been caught up recently. That may be due to the fact that you have players like Charlie Rodriguez, Edson Navares, Eder Gutierrez, Hector Herrera. These other players who are playing better, and some of them are playing in Europe. So maybe he's falling down the pecking order just a little bit. But depending how he does this season with America, he might get a recall. I'm not sure about that. And I hate to say, James, but I really do think Carlos Vela's career with the Mexican national team is over since that 2018 World Cup concluded because I really liked him, but it was just so much drama to where I want to play with the national team. You know what? I don't want to play with the national team. You know what? Let me give it another shot. I'll go ahead and play with the national team. And now it's back to I don't want any business with y'all anymore. That kind of bothered me because there's a lot of stories out there from Mexican players, from players that play with Carlos Vela that said he was a very, very, very talented footballer, but he never reached his peak or the levels that people expected him to. Because I remember seeing interviews from Mexican national team players how the most talented player to play with, they always say Carlos Vela. His left foot was really magical. He's really cool and calm collected on the ball. And we've seen that with LAFC. He made for one or two seasons, he made the whole league look like it was on a whole nother level below him because just the way he took the league by storm with LAFC. But it does kind of pain me to hear, he is in his 30s, early 30s. I feel like he might have a year or two to offer, but it's just a matter of the case that the player does not want to play with the national team. And That just really pains me to say that. I do think his career is done with the national team. What do you think, James? Do you think there's any hope for him to come back?
At this point, I don't see a real, clear way in and especially if he's in a league that I think Tata doesn't seem to value as much as Liga MX, which I understand, but it's unfortunate.
I'll say these last three names about call-ups didn't hear, then I'll transition to the U.S. men's national team. But Marcelo Flores, he is a U23 player for the Arsenal team. He got called up to the friendly against Chile, but he didn't get caught up this time. And there was always people are going to say this kid's still young. He has to earn a call-up. You can't just call him up because he plays for Arsenal. The way I look at it is, Mexico's in a position to where, they're in third place. They need to win these games, not only to, obviously, because you're expected to go to the World Cup. But I think a real expectation that was set for Tata Martino was to finish in first in qualifiers. And, he's a winger. So you take away Lozano, you take away Tecatito Corona. Who else do you have? You have a Lightness who doesn't really play. You have a Uriel Antuna who stays in Liga MX. I feel like his game hasn't really improved. Alvarado's aiming getting called up. You have these players who don't really fit the bill. And I feel like you need to call Marcelo Flores just because he has that European experience. And also, he could also get caught up by the Canadian national team. And who's to say the Canadian Soccer Federation doesn't say, hey, Marcelo, look, we have an exciting project. We've beat Mexico already, and we've tied them. They haven't beaten us in the octagonal qualifiers. What's to say? Come join us. There's young players here. They do play in Europe, and you'll have a better chance of starting rather than waiting until Chucky, Lozano, or Tecatito get hurt or later in their careers when they're out of form. So that's why I feel like you need to call them up now to where you snatch them up from other teams that could possibly get them. So I feel like I was really surprised when they didn't call him up. And another player to keep an eye on is Jose Marcias. He's another player from the Chivas Academy where they do produce really great young Mexican talent. However, he moved to Europe, specifically with Getafe in the La Liga, the top division in Spain, and he hasn't really found his footing. He's barely even named to the roster sheet for Getafe. Doesn't really make the bench either. He's just been having tough times over there. I really hope he does improve, but the fact that we have another young striker in Europe, maybe bringing him back to the Mexican national team, showing him, find that rediscovered that form and happiness that he has playing soccer, and maybe representing his country might bring that back. But that's a really big take. And this young striker Jimenez, who plays for Cruz Azul, he's someone that did really good against that friendly against Chile. So these are three young players that I feel like they might have earned a call up. Hopefully we do see them soon. I hope we do. But so far it looks like the Mexican national team is going to have to rely on the European players and the veteran players to step up after a year to forget for Mexico. But with all that being said, I'll turn it over to Ben and James to talk about the U.S. men's national team.
Yeah, so we will jump right into that. And the U.S. have been doing pretty well at home so far, and then, more mixed results away from home. And just like Leo had, some problems with the national team call-ups, I think that that's just true for every fan of a national team. But there were a lot of injuries, and poor form have made an impression on the roster that ultimately was called for the U.S. So just really quickly, Gio Reyna is still out recovering from an injury. Gianluca Buzio has COVID. Daryl Dike just injured himself. Matthew Hoppe has just recovered from an injury. Josh Sargent is not on good form. Conrad De La Fuente and Richie Ledesma are both out with a longer-term injury and then returning from injury. So those are the injury and form problems. And now we get into some players that, might or might not have deserved a call-up here. Ben, do you think that there were any players on the list that you were kind of surprised to see? Or were there any players that you felt were left off?
Honestly, I feel like this is kind of going against U.S. men's national team Twitter, but I'm perfectly happy with the call-ups. We don't really know what goes on behind closed doors, so it's hard to say, is John Brooks really like a locker room problem, like some people are saying? Like, we don't really know. We'll probably never know because they like to keep that stuff in house. But you got to bring in Dest. He's one of the top talents, on the roster. Yedlin's been very great in Concacaf. He knows how to Concacaf, so he's going to bring it. Mark McKenzie, he's just been, he hasn't been, playing a whole lot over in Europe. I mean, he's playing, enough, but he's been a really great player at the national team level. Joe Scally, he just broke into his club not too long ago. You got to let him stay there, continue working with the first team. You don't really develop at the national team level. You develop at your club. So I'd rather Joe Scally, stay in Germany for that. James Sands recently made a move, I believe. Didn't he go to like Scotland or Ireland or something?
Yeah, he just moved to Rangers in Scotland.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty top-heavy league, and honestly, like MLS is probably on par, if not better, than most of that league, aside from like the Rangers and the other team like Celtic or whatever.
Yeah.
Celtic, not 100% sure how to say it. Either way, the quality of the league isn't, it's not like, oh my gosh, he went to Europe, now he should be a starter for the team. Like, no, settle down. It's probably on par with MLS. And then I know PFOC is, he's been in decent form lately. He had like a 3 or a 4 goal game not too long ago, but how much playing time is he really going to get with the strikers that they have on the roster? So I'm fine with the call ups. Were there any omissions or head scratching decisions you had in mind here?
When I looked at the roster, one thing that I did note was at the fullback positions. You had mentioned, Dest. Obviously, I see the value in bringing Dest along, even if he isn't getting as much playing time as you'd like at Barcelona. He's still at Barcelona. They might be having one of their worst years in recent memory, but they are still a massive club, and I think that anybody who can make it there is good enough for this team at this point. Maybe that'll change in the future, but certainly not right now. Deandre Yedlin was a bit of a head scratcher for me just because his time at Galatasaray in Turkey recently has not been great. But it should be mentioned, like you said, he has a lot of experience in the CONCACAF game, and he knows how to deal with what they're going to deal with. So he's definitely got the background. And he probably offers a locker room presence that someone else might not, that would take up his position. So the fullback options, as far as I remember them, are Reggie Cannon, who has also been playing center back recently for his club. Deandre Yedlin are, the two designated right backs, so to speak. Serginho Dest is also a right back, but I think that he is currently also being looked at for left back because the only other out-and-out left back on the roster is Anthony Robinson, who's been in amazing form for Fulham recently in England. So I don't disvalue any of those options. The only thing that I had in mind with Joe Scally was that he is getting consistent playing time in a league that is probably better than the league that Anthony Robinson is playing in, better than the league Deandre Yedlin is playing in, and he can play both right back and left back as well. So I figured he might actually be due for a call-up, but he also is just returning from COVID, so that's something to note. He only had 2 substitute appearances between him returning from COVID and this roster being announced. So, it's probably not all that surprising that he was left off in the end. John Brooks is another one that was mentioned, but is he this, locker room problem? Who's to say? We don't have that insight. The only other person that I wanted to note from the roster was Gabriel Slonina. He goes by Gaga Slonina, and he is a 17-year-old goalkeeper. So there aren't too many goalkeepers that get called up at 17 years old. It's like he might be something of a prodigy. But the other thing about Gaga Slonina is that he is of Polish descent. And I'm thinking that maybe it's kind of along the lines of David Ochoa, whom we were just talking about with Leo, where if he can get the passport to go and play for Poland, Poland might be, trying to get this kid to come and play for them because he seems to be such a good goalkeeper. He already is a starter for the Chicago Fire in MLS. And at 17, when, goalkeepers usually peak after they're 30 years old, he probably has a very good career in front of him. So I don't mind him being called in. He's obviously not going to see playing time unless something really disastrous happens, but I would trust him even if it did actually get to him. So that is a couple notes on the roster. There were 28 players total called up to cover for COVID over the course of these 3 games. Obviously, it's knocked out several players between us and other teams. I know Canada just had a player test positive for COVID, but he has come back recently enough that he will be able to travel for them. Canada also, though, will have to leave out Alphonso Davis. He is still suffering from symptoms due to COVID, so he will not be able to be there, unfortunately for them, and I think pretty fortunately for us. Ben, it looks like that would be a big miss for them, even though we are facing what would be our version of the Estadio Azteca. So for a tiny bit of background, when the Canadian national team played Mexico in the last window, they played them in blizzard conditions because I think they thought that that would be an advantage to the Canadian players. And with the Mexican national team, they usually play at the Estadio Azteca. So they named it the Estadio Azteca as a little play on words there. And I thought that that was pretty good. But they do have pretty much blizzard conditions coming up in Hamilton for our game against Canada. However, it should be noted that the U.S. is also trying to take advantage of cold conditions. Both of our home games are going to be played in very cold locales. Right now, Ohio is blanketed in snow. And Minnesota, obviously, I think everybody knows what Minnesota in January is going to look like as well. So, you know, with all of that being said, I think that the game in Edmonton at the Estadio Azteca, as Canada called it, kind of worked to their advantage. They ended up winning both the games they played there. Do you see this as having a positive effect on our upcoming games with, you know, with the games in Ohio and Minnesota, and then also playing in Hamilton?
I think I don't really know how much of an advantage it gives the U.S. playing, you know, in these kind of conditions against, who is it, El Salvador and Honduras. You know, they're not used to playing in the snow, but the snow kind of turns the games into almost like a kickball, skyball type thing where, you know, injuries are, you know, at a higher, you know, they might happen a little bit more in these kinds of conditions. And like pound for pound, the U.S. roster is better than El Salvador. We're better than Honduras. Like they can beat these teams on like a neutral site. So, I mean, there is a slight advantage to playing in the snow just because the other teams aren't accustomed to it. But it also kind of takes away from some like tactical things they like to do because we know the U.S. wants to play out of the back. It's going to be tougher in the snow. You know, there's going to be a slight advantage, but I'd rather see the games, you know, played in the cold, maybe not snow. Canada, they can do whatever they want. You know, if they want to turn this into a kickball, skyball game, go ahead. But I think they're going to want to do that just because the U.S. roster is, you know, I know we're, you know, behind them in points right now in qualifying, but they still have top to bottom like a more, you know, high quality roster than Canada. So I could see why they would do that. I don't know. There's a lot of politics that go into who hosts these qualifying games and who doesn't. Like, do they have the stadiums for it? You know, does an MLS team play there because the MLS owners kind of like own U.S. soccer in a way? So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of it, but it is what it is. The U.S., you know, they just need to go out there, get, you know, 6-7 points, and I'll be happy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking here. You know, with these two home games against what are the second to last place and the last place teams in the standings, you absolutely need those to turn into 6 points. But my question then turns into this. So is there a strategy to attacking these three games? As I started this section with, the U.S. has done well at home and they had, you know, mixed results away from home. So my question then to you, Ben, is with this strategy, do we want to try to win all three games, or do we want to try and win our home games and then, you know, anything else on top of that is just kind of a cherry on top of the sundae? Of course, we want to win all of our games, but you kind of have to be realistic about not only what you're dealing with in terms of settings and availability of players, but also, you know, the national team that you're up against here with Canada.
I think we'll definitely see some like heavy squad rotation just because 3 games in what, like 6 or 7 days is pretty intense. You know, and especially with the US having such a young roster, like you don't want to wear their bodies down when they're in the middle of their seasons over in Europe and all that stuff. So I think they do want to try to win all 3 games, but I think the emphasis is going to be on the games at home, like it typically is. You know, you want to win your home games and try to steal a point on the road. So going into Canada is where they're going to want to, like, you know, try to get a draw out of it. The conditions are going to be tough, so I don't think they're going to be as tactically sound as they want to be. But at home, I think they're gonna go all out and, you know, put their best possible 11 out there so they can get a chance to win.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I would fall on that too. It's I kind of go back and forth whenever I think about it, but you know, definitely the home games are going to be the bigger focus if there is going to be an emphasis placed on any of these games. Do you see any pitfalls in either of those strategies? I know obviously we mentioned that it would be harder to go up against Canada, but Do you think that maybe if we say focused on just the 2 home games, there is a potential down the road that could come back to bite us?
I think it could, but the U.S. is in a pretty good spot right now in qualifying, in second place. It's not, no offense here, Leo, but it's not like Mexico where they kind of have to go out and get, 9 points. 7 would be, acceptable for them, but they need 9 points. They really do. So, you don't want to be in that play-in game. Obviously, it's not the end of the world if they are, but you want to be in control of your own destiny, and that's where the U.S. is at right now. So, I think if they go out and draw or even lose that first game, I think there are going to be a lot of people being very loud on social media, but that's going to happen even if they win. We've seen that for any national team, really. Like, even if you're winning games, people are going to be calling for the coach's head. So I think they'll be fine against El Salvador. They're not going to rest any key players, but they're definitely going to focus on that rotation. And they have the depth to do it, so I don't really think we'll see any major problems there. But what about you?
Yeah, I tend to agree with everything that you went through there. The only, our issues down the line, I guess, the potential that, the last 3 games in March are going to be very important. That's probably not a place we want to be in, because our last games are away to Mexico in Estadio Azteca, and that's obviously always a hard game. Then, we host Panama, and we're away to Costa Rica. So 2 home games, you probably don't want to have to focus on, getting the results in March is kind of my point. And I think that if we do the job here, we should have enough space between ourselves and the people who would, be there to take us off to, keep our spot in the table and make sure that we do qualify. So right now, for me, my outlook is just, stay on track, essentially. Keep it going, positive with the home record at the very least. And then I think that that's probably what we're going to need here in terms of results.
Yeah, may I say quickly, James? I think anything that at least this year for World Cup qualifiers in the Octagonal that has showed us is that, whoever's in first place, that could change very quickly, because we've seen Mexico in first place, we've seen the U.S. in first place, and we've seen Canada now in first place. So I feel like every single team, specifically those top 3 teams, they need to take 9 points out of 9 in order to stay in first place. And also, we've seen teams like Costa Rica, Jamaica, Panama, they're taking their turns breaking into that top 4. So if you drop points, who's to say that Honduras or Panama or Costa Rica can make up those 3 points that you just dropped and then might get closer to where you're at. And that puts more pressure on you. And that's speaking for, both Mexico and U.S. because, it comes to a point where you have 6 games remaining. You're halfway through the qualifiers. You really need to win the remaining 3 games. It'd be best if you win your home games and you don't lose your away games. I think that's a good formula to get into the World Cup and also, get that number 1 spot or a top 3 spot to avoid that 4th place where, you go to the next round, but who's to say you don't get out against a New Zealand or another oceanic team. And in regards to, the U.S. and their team, I really think they have a good team. It ain't easy to play in the snow, as I seen from Mexico when they played against Canada that one game. It just looked like they were frozen the entire game. Yeah. But with all that being said, I think it just shows how, how more competitive Concacaf has gotten when you do include Canada in there. So I do think, the U.S. goes to Canada and tries to play for a win, but if they leave with a tie, it's not the worst result, because it is hard to play there. But if they, 9 points out of 9, that also puts them in a very strong position to finish on top of the octagon.
It sure does. It sure does. So with all of that out of the way now, I think we are going to go roundtable this, and we are going to give our confidence ratings heading into the qualifiers on a scale of 1 to 10. So the way that we're going to do it is whether or not they're going to win all of their games. So again, 3 games coming up here. And if I am going into, what are we going to do on all 3 games? I'm going to put my confidence at 5, dead even. We will probably do well at home, and then Canada is a big toss-up for me. So, Ben, I'll give it over to you, and then we'll go to Leo last to discuss Mexico again.
I'd probably say, 8 or 9, honestly. I think they'll take care of business at home pretty easily. I do agree that Canada is going to be a trickier game. But something that's a little interesting that, it might affect the games a lot. It might not. I feel like it'll affect the games because, every time I watch the U.S. play in CONCACAF, there's always, some off the ball extracurricular stuff going on. They are adding in the VAR for this qualifying window and the future
That's
one.
right.
So that's great because Weston McKennie
Really good
has,
point, yeah.
a hand around his neck every single qualifying window. So I feel like that stuff is going to get cleaned up a little bit. And I think, it'll be better when they're facing, when the US is facing, lesser quality opponents because they like to, they'll dig in, they'll drag their foot behind in a tackle. They'll go studs up a couple times and the ref will look the other way. So that stuff is going to get cleaned up. So I feel pretty confident that, things are going to go the US's way in terms of on the field decisions a little bit more often than they used to. So, yeah, and the team is looking great. So I'd say 8 or 9 as my confidence level.
All right. Well, that sounds pretty good. And Leo, what about you? Tell me how you are looking at Mexico for this.
My confidence level in regards to the players that they brought, it seems like they finally. I feel like this year will be the year where they turn the shift a little bit more. And thankfully, we're not playing Canada or US in this window. So for those reasons, I'm gonna give my confidence rating a 7. I would give them 8 or 9, but coming off of last year, they've just been too inconsistent sometimes. They've really been disappointing. So I just want to really see how they play that first game in the qualifiers this week. But for right now, it's looking like a 7. And I just want to touch on a point James, you and Ben made about the coaching for the men's national team. Greg Berhalter, I feel like he's someone that has always been doubted by the U.S. national team fan base, especially by pundits and analysts on TV, which I don't know why. Because this man literally came in with the C team and beat Mexico's A team in the Copa Oro in the Gold
He
Cup,
did. Yeah.
and still it's like he still has more to prove. He comes in the qualifiers, he gets a good run of results. He beats Mexico again, and yet people are still questioning if he's the right man. So I just feel like this may apply for every single national team, not only Concacaf, but anywhere on the globe. But you can win 5 games in a row, but there's always that question: are you the right man for the job? And Greg Berhalter, I feel like I got to give credit to him. Like before, Mexico just really bossed USA, and now they're really competitive games, and Greg Berhalter is always getting the edge over Tata Martino. So I just gotta give credit to him. And I want to ask both of you. There was a game in the qualifiers last year where Greg Berhalter made about 6 or 7 changes in his team, and that's the game where they lost. Do you see him making the same mistake like that? Maybe not against Canada, but maybe his other 2 opponents where he might make, a significant amount of changes and maybe lose the game?
I think, any changes that he's going to make are going to be the right ones this time, just because the squad rotation stuff is relatively new. Like they've never had 3 games in a qualifying window before, but COVID, messed everything up. So I think he definitely learned from any mistakes he might have made. And the roster selections have been solid. He's been doing a great job. He's like one of the most successful coaches in U.S. history so far, in the same time frame. They had one of the best calendar years ever. So I think he's doing a great job, and I trust him to make the appropriate decisions as they arise.
Yeah, I generally do as well. I think, Ben, you hit on this earlier. When it comes to people, hating on Berhalter, I think that's kind of just soccer Twitter's natural state. I had doubts about Berhalter when they brought him in because it seemed like it was a bit of a corrupt process, like actually hiring him as opposed to, I liked Oscar Pereja for one of the coaches who was possibly being looked at, but, he didn't really seem to get as much of a shake. So in the beginning, I was kind of like, well, let's see how it goes. I don't really like the way that this played out. And since then, I do think that he has shown that he has got the ability to get really good results. And, when everybody showed up at the Gold Cup and he had the roster he had, he said, we're here to win this thing. And I think, especially me, but a lot of fans rolled their eyes like, okay, yeah, you're going to win with that one. And then, as you said, they did go out and they won that one. They beat Mexico all 3 times in that. In 2021. So I really can't fault him for that. It's, touch and go at times, sure, but in the end, he has made up for it. And Ben, you probably see more on Twitter, but the state of U.S. men's national team Twitter is just a farce sometimes.
Oh, it's amazing. It's so entertaining. Like you'll get so many, not so many different viewpoints, but so many people sharing the same viewpoint over and over again, and it's fun. We have a great time out there, and I usually stay away from that stuff. Not gonna get involved there. Just gonna watch from the sidelines, and I just love the style of play. I love what the national team has been doing. I have no complaints right now. I'm loving it.
Or for the record, I will say that when the U.S. were looking for the man to lead the team, my eyes were automatically drawn to Caleb Porter, but he didn't get the job. I thought he was someone that could really take the U.S. to a new level, but it looks like Greg Berhalter, obviously besides the adversity of how he got that job, has taken him to that next level.
And they're not done either. Like this team is the team. Like the average age is like what, like on this roster 23, 24, like they're not even close to their peak yet, and they're one of the best teams, if not the best team in CONCACAF. So 5 years from now, it's going to be even better as the depth continues to build. Like these guys continue to break into their first teams. Like Pulisic is what, like 22, 23 still. Dest is 20, 21. Like McKennie's only 21 or 22. Like so many young quality players, and they're not done yet. So I'm excited about this team.
Would you find it as like maybe like an obstacle or something that might hinder their chances of making it far in the World Cup because they are so young and they don't really have the experience to live off of? I think right now what we see sometimes when the U.S. isn't playing well, they just rely on pure talent from their teams just because it's played with these big teams. But again, Pulisic isn't really getting playing time. Dest isn't really getting playing time. Do you see that as like an obstacle that U.S. has to overcome? The fact that they can't really rely on experience and some of their best players aren't really getting playing time in their clubs.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like young players just aren't that good. Like it sucks to say that, but like there was I think it was the USL Tactics guy who put out something on Twitter. I don't know. Somebody put like a value added model graph based on age and like how they contribute to their team's success, and like most players really aren't that good until they're like 24, 25. Like when you're a teenager, you're on a team and they're probably playing really poorly just because, your body's not fully developed. Your brain isn't fully developed till you're like 23, 24, 25. So I think that was part of the reason why the US was kind of not doing poorly, but they were kind of just treading water for a couple of years. But now that the players are getting older, they're breaking into their first team more. I think it's helped, but again, they are still really young, so it's hard to say how far they can go. But as long as they continue to do this and continue gaining those experiences and growing physically, mentally, growing as a team with each other, I think they'll get better. But right now, they are pretty young, so it's hard to say.
And with all of that as well, we'd have another question to hit on before we get into our last segment, the One More Thing segment. David Morales, at Davey from Tampa, says, we've seen the league celebrating call-ups to national teams by USL players recently. Would you want the Rowdies to have more international players at the risk they won't have them available for a stretch of time? We have Rico, who has been called up by Cuba and could be again. So I'll go really quickly on this one, or maybe not so quickly, but I would love to see Rowdies players called up a lot more. I think that when Cuba has chances to play, Rico Rosarena will be called up because they don't regularly have a lot of players outside of Cuba. So the fact that he's getting, the regular professionalized training that is going to be provided by the Tampa Bay Rowdies, he will probably get those call-ups. And it's just unfortunate that Cuba has been unable to play a lot recently, especially when they could have qualified for the Gold Cup if their team had not been, prevented from traveling due to COVID restrictions. They actually had a very good roster there. But I have put out in the past an article requesting that Jordan Scarlett be called up to Jamaica because I think that he has earned that with his play in the USL Championship. And that's especially for a team that regularly calls up USL Championship players. It's not like they're averse to doing so. I think that Jordan Scarlett would be a very good addition to their roster. And he has he has shown that he is capable of competing with players, especially at the level, that El Salvador plays, or Panama or Honduras, because there are players for the national teams, for those national teams, who come from the USL Championship. Another one would be Juan Tejada. I think that he had, an unlucky year last year because he was injured so frequently, and hopefully he'll be able to get past that. Steven Dos Santos is a player that I was really hoping would get a call up to the Africa Cup of Nations, which is going on right now, playing for Cape Verde. He has not been called up, and there are players, that seem, as far as I can tell, to be of a similar level to him getting called up. So maybe they're just unaware that he is doing what he's doing here, and that would be unfortunate for him, because I definitely think that compared to the players that are in his spot on the roster, he appears to be just about the same level, and I'd love to see him get a call up. Outside of that, I'm not sure how many players are on or would represent teams that they could get a call up for, but I'm sure I'm missing a couple of guys. I would definitely love to see those ones that I mentioned get called up, and I think that it would be a huge boost for the Rowdies to get that international recognition, even if it means that some of them are missing again. The whole point, or for a period, the whole point of having a roster is that you have depth, because even if Jordan Scarlett is missing, it might be for international games, it might be for an injury. You're supposed to have somebody there to replace him. So I personally would love it, but what about you guys?
I think it's the same feeling as like we seen with Forrest Lasso, where he left the team, but we were happy for him because he went to a new team and it was a top division. Like, we're happy for players when they do accomplish these kind of goals in their careers. And I know when Juan Tejada, like you said, James, it was very unfortunate for him to make his debut with the national team, but the fact that he did receive that call up, I think it's very special for Rowdies fans and Rowdies community people, because he's someone that you watch. You go to games and you watch him play, then you see him on TV playing for, representing his country. And also, he's a homegrown player. He's someone from the local area. So I feel like that's a really great story to see, unfold. And you talk about Jordan Scarlett in regards to the Jamaican national team. These are players that you want, they deserve a call up. And if the opportunity is there, then definitely they should take it, because, it's definitely a once in a lifetime opportunity to represent your country. When you put on that national team jersey, I feel like it's different from when you put on the Rowdies jersey. And that's no dig or slide to the Rowdies. It's just that, you're representing your country. You're representing the entire people that stand behind you and go to the games and cheer for you, just like you do with the Rowdies. So I feel like, I would definitely love to see more players get caught up to their national teams. If it's possible, or will that be possible moving forward? Maybe if Jordan Scarlett could keep up his good form, if Juan Tejada could get back to that Juan Tejada we know that he can be, if Cuba decides to call up Rico again, I feel like I would be extremely happy for these players to get caught up to their national team and to wear those jerseys and play, for their country.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the dream for a lot of these guys, is to play for your national team. Like, that's what they want to do. So I would love to see, more Rowdies players getting called up to their national teams. That would be awesome. And it's only going to be for a game, maybe 2 games every window or so, which really, the drop off in a replacement player isn't that much for a game or 2. Obviously over the course of a season it would, be a lot greater, but if they miss Rico for a game, that's not going to, jeopardize their season or anything. But if they miss him for, half the season or more, that's when it would be concerning. But that wouldn't happen. It'd be for a game or 2 every once in a while. I don't see any harm in that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because another thing is that we see players in Europe, if they're not getting playing time in their team, they force a move, whether it's a loan move or a permanent move. They force a move so that way they can get called up to play with their country. So as you said, Ben, it's like that these players dream of playing for their nations. So, they literally force a move so that they can represent their nation by getting regular playing time at another club. Because it is a really big achievement, and that's something I definitely do want to see more with these Rowdies players.
Well, it appears then that the answer to this question from @Davey from Tampa is a resounding yes from everyone on the panel. But that is going to do it for our episode on the Concacaf World Cup qualifiers. So we are going to move into the last segment here very quickly. Any questions or topics you want us to cover in this offseason, please let us know. We are obviously happy to do so, and we've got a couple more weeks before we can actually talk about, you know, what the Rowdies are doing themselves. So we're going to keep up with what we've been doing. We did the first part of our history series last week. We're going to do the second part next week, and hopefully that will lead into our interview with the esteemed Ian Penderleith. So look out for those, obviously. And like I said, any topics that you would like us to discover, we can squeeze them in after that. Additionally, if you can, please like and subscribe to our podcast, of course. But if you think that you might need some new clothes for this cold weather snap that we're dealing with, you can also support this podcast by heading over to our shop. That is shop.rblrsports.com. You can check out all the designs that we've got going on there. The link in our description will include the promo code COYR for 10% off. So obviously, if you would like to get that discounted, please do so there. And I want to note one more thing before we go and let everybody away for the night. There is an account on Twitter called Footy Scran. So Scran here means, like, you know, just food that you can find at a game. So Footy Scran is an account that people send the whatever food they've been able to get, usually at lower league soccer games, and they will repost it with the price. And there is also now a Footy Bevs account. So that is for the beverages at these games. And the Tampa Bay Rowdies partner, Beans and Barler, made it onto that page. So if you want to go and check that out, first of all, I think it's a very fun account to follow. But yeah, the Beans and Barler, their alcoholic milkshake made it onto the Footy Bevs page. So check that out. I thought it was pretty cool. And that should be it for tonight. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Obviously, like I said, please follow RBLR Sports. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can follow me if you would like to do so. I am on Twitter at RBLR James K. Leo, Ben, where can they reach you guys?
You can reach me on Twitter at _Leo Santos __.
And my thing, it's an old gamer tag, so, you know, don't ask questions, but it's at dogpancake73, all one word.
All right, well, that one's good to know. And please, if you can, also use the hashtag AskRBLR for any questions like we had one tonight. Like and subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and all other major podcast platforms. And Ben, you are a gracious co-host tonight, so we want to throw it to you for any final thoughts before we sign off.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This has been fun, and I'm looking forward to the U.S. getting 7 or 9 points. Either one's fine with me, because my happiness and my mental health depend on how the national team performs. So if I need to be, you know, in a good place for the next couple months, I do need them to perform. So looking forward to that.
I think you speak for a lot of people when you say that.
Yeah, let me just tell you this, Ben. I would feel a lot more confident if I was a USA fan than a Mexico fan right now.
Yeah, it's nice to be in this position right now. We're not too used to it, so I don't really know, like, what to do with myself. But I'm just enjoying it, honestly.
Yes, that I don't know what to do with my hands gift.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that will do it for us all tonight. And as always, we end every week with our chant, "Come on, you Rowdies."
Come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.